واجبة أموات وإنك على كل شيء قدير. وصل اللهم على محمد وعلى الطيبين الطاهرين. وصل على محمد وعجل فرجه وكرم يا الله. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله.
And oftentimes when we take a look historically in our lives and our upbringing, the notion and the concept of death is seemingly something very distant. Because we ourselves block it away as something that's never going to happen to us. Oftentimes, again, because we associate it with something that is truly horrific. Something that is very violent, something that is very dark, something that is very scary. But oftentimes when we begin to reflect upon this particular subject, it's often connotated in our minds within a particular frame, which makes us in a state where we are very defensive towards speaking about a subject that in reality is the absolute reality and destination for every single one of us.
لا إله إلا الله.
Sheikhna, city of Karbala, in a cemetery. Did you expect to be here?
No.
How does it feel when you visit a cemetery?
It feels real. Life feels real for the first time. Every time you visit a cemetery, because our lives are so filled with how many a distraction. What's more real than our own mortality? And walking in this space and looking over at those graves and seeing, as we're entering into the cemetery, the areas where the bodies are to be washed, nothing feels more real than that. Meaning that everything else just feels fake. It feels transient. It feels like it's something that is virtually worthless. But everything over here, life, all of a sudden, has a little bit more perspective to it. So,
does it make a difference because it's Karbala?
No. In some ways, maybe yes, because when we enter into the city, you feel a little bit more of a unique and deeper connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of the blessing of the King of Martyrs, Imam al-Hussein. But at the end of the day, you know, a graveyard is a graveyard, you know, wherever it is, if it's in New York, or if it's in the holy city of Karbala, or it's in Wadi al-Salam, or it's really anywhere in the world. At the end of the day, it's an abode, and really we don't know where it is that we're going to be buried tomorrow. So it doesn't hit any differently that it's in Karbala, personally at least.
I asked you before we started about death, and you said you speak a lot about death.
Yeah.
Why, Sheikh?
You know, I think that over the last couple of years, especially in the midst of the, you know, COVID pandemic, mortality is so close, and probably closer to me than it ever has been. I lived in New York City during the pandemic, where there were such an abundance of mortalities taking place. Every single day I would get a phone call, I would attend a funeral, or I would speak to someone who had just lost a loved one in the hope of consoling them. I myself also experienced loss in my family. And I remember in the middle of, those days, it was the month of, it was Shahr Ramadan. And I remember going to sleep one day and I woke up, and I tell my community this so often. I woke up from a dream where I saw myself drowning in dead bodies. Literally, I was in the middle, and there was all of these bodies around me, wrapped in their death shrouds. And I woke up, and it probably was a dream that took place for, I don't know, a matter of 10, 15 seconds. But it's this image that since that night, I just can't remove it from my mind. And I think that the pandemic undoubtedly showed, at least me, and I'm sure many, many others as well, just again how close our own mortality is, but not necessarily in such a bad way either. I think that when we talk about death, we visit a cemetery, oftentimes we're channeled to think that everything that we're experiencing is very cryptic. Someone might be asking, like, why are we sitting over here having a conversation, this holy city of Karbala, like in front of a graveyard and in the darkness of the night? And someone would say that I don't want to participate in this because it's just weird, I don't think it's weird at all, because remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like created us so that we can reach ultimate perfection, and He created us for our own success. And though it might be difficult, because naturally we are fearful, as Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen states, we're often fearful of that which we are ignorant to. We're ignorant about what life is like, in the world beyond this one. The same way that when we were in the womb of our mothers, we were comfortable, right? We were warm. It's pretty cold out here. We were satiated.
Very cold.
Yeah, we were satiated. We were with the one who cared about us and loved us the most. All of a sudden we enter into the dunya, like what do? We start screaming and crying because we have to deal with people, we have to deal with different experiences, right? And no longer are we so comfortable, so to say. But at the end of the day, you fast forward 30, 40, 50, 70 years of someone's life, no one is going to say, I want to go back to the womb of my mom, maybe unless they're having a really bad day. But naturally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create us for this world. He created us for a world beyond this one. And just as He was merciful to us in the womb of our mother, just as He was merciful to us on the day that we were born into this world, just as He was merciful to us in that first year of our life when obviously we're very fragile, He'll be merciful to us in the world beyond this one. It's just a good reminder, but the reality is such that He is Arhamar Rahimeen, and I think that our picture of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that undoubtedly needs to change and needs to shift. And particularly when it comes to talking about, our own mortality.
Before I ask you about maybe, sadly, your loss, what was your first experience of death? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. I can't remember how old I was, but I do remember going with my father to a funeral of, I believe, a friend of his who had passed away. Maybe I was 8, 9, 10 years old. I don't remember anything about that day. The only thing that I remember is watching the funeral, but not really watching the funeral in and of itself, meaning that this man entering into the grave. I just remember staring at his son, who was probably my age, weeping.
Your age now? Or
no, my age then,
okay.
who was a young boy, 8, 9, 10, 12 years old, I don't know. And I remember staring at him the entire time. I just remember staring at him and wondering, like, oh my goodness, like what is he going through? And I don't think about that particular episode very often, but oftentimes when I do think about death and I do think about mortality, or I read verse on, or I read some ahadith of Ahlul Bayt that mention, many times I go back to that picture in my mind. I remember this kid wearing a blue shirt who was crying as his father was entering into the grave, and obviously it's really heartbreaking, to think. And that's undoubtedly my first memory, or my earliest memory when I think about death.
Did the recent death of someone you lost affect you? If so, what way?
Yeah, of course. Just days ago, a few weeks ago, I lost my grandmother. During the pandemic, my wife's mother had passed away. Only a few months before that, or a few years before that, my grandfather, who was very close to it, passed away. And we experience mortality with, those friends, those companions, those people in the community who lost their parents, who lost their children consistently, right? Death consistently is around us, and it surrounds us, and sometimes it overwhelms us. And I think that, naturally we demonstrate grief, and I think that many times people within our tradition, they really struggle to navigate, the balance between grief and something like patience. Someone tells them, you don't need to weep, you don't need to cry, because that's not the way that Lady Zainab alayhi salam acted, or that's not the way that this person acted.
Okay.
And I think that type of rhetoric is not really founded within our tradition at all. Rather there is a balance, right? There's a balance between showing a sense of grief. Lady Fatima alayhi salam, she grieved when her father passed away, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Lady Zainab, she grieved when Imam al-Hussein also passed away. There's moments during someone's grief naturally, where they may allow for questions to enter into their mind, like, why did this happen now to my family member, right? Why did my mom pass away? Why did my father pass away? And that question itself can potentially do damage to our souls. Grief in and of itself, with acceptance that this is the destiny of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that itself is something valuable, right? That's why we greet people when they have lost a loved one with, Adam Allah ujurakum, right? May Allah increase you in your reward, because you're being rewarded for the tragedy that you're enduring at that given moment. So naturally, we're human beings. We lose someone, we lose something, we break something, we get sad. Let alone, someone that we spend time with, someone that we socialize with, someone that we lived with, someone that we used to rely on every single day. It's only normal. There's nothing wrong with being in a state of grief. At the same time, it's really, really important also to recognize that we have to be in a state of acceptance too. And it might be an opportunity for us to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we've lost a loved one, because of how close it hit to us. In a way that's much more devotional, or that much more sort of meaningful. If that makes sense.
I'm sure in your own community, you've had people where they've lost a loved one, and it's difficult for them to cope with that loss. How would you advise someone when it comes to coping, especially maybe if someone loses someone young? Sometimes when may Allah bless all our fathers, there comes an age where, sadly they have to go. This is the sunnah, the way of life. But sometimes when someone loses maybe their son or someone young, or when it's an unexpected death, and it becomes a real struggle, how would you advise them to cope with that struggle of losing that loved one?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Obviously, it's really challenging. And for God forbid, for someone to lose their child. I just a few days before I entered into the city of Karbala, came for ziyarah, I went to go and visit a man who had just lost his wife in a really, really horrific car accident, really horrific, back in my community. And as I was talking to him, asking him about how he's feeling and how his kids are feeling, his kids from, 5 or 6 children, the youngest who was 6 or 7 years old, they all lost their mother. And as I was conversing with him, he told me that as horrific as the situation that he has endured is for him, even though he was a man of faith and conviction and belief, he said, yes, I'm worried about my children, I'm worried about my youngest, 7 or 8 years old. He said, none of this compares to when I lost my 13-year-old son. 13-year-old son who had died due to some heart condition, unfortunately, that he had. May Allah have mercy upon him and his wife as well. And I'm telling him that the episode that in which your wife had passed away again in a car accident is horrific. You have children over here, and he said it does not compare 1 ounce. These words. It does not compare 1 ounce to when I had to see, or when I had to bury my own son. It didn't compare. So naturally, coping with something like that, it takes time, And I think that again, we don't want to be so dogmatic in our approach when someone has lost a loved one, everyone goes through different emotions. It's only natural, right?
Yeah.
We are not, we're not robots naturally. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the, teachings and the etiquette and the akhlaq of Ahlul Bayt, peace and blessings be upon them, was not such as to, have a one-size-fits-all sort of box that everyone needs to fit in, especially when we're talking about something like that of one's death or mortality or that of a loved one. So everyone is going to naturally process these things differently. For some people, it's going to take a really long time. People are never going to get over the loss of their mother, their father, their grandparent, their child, God forbid. But we need to be able to create mechanisms to be the solace for those who are dealing with that and seeking toward coping. That means listening. One of the most important qualities of the Prophet ﷺ was that he was a good listener. We often think of the head of state, the messenger of God, being someone who speaks, right? Someone who is eloquent, someone who is always leading, oftentimes by language. But as is mentioned within chapter 9 of the Holy Quran, the Meccans, one of the ways that they would annoy the Prophet, they would state, Huwa udhunun. He's all ears in our language, All this guy does is listen. Yeah. That's what actually makes him attractive. And I think that if we open up our doors, our ears, our hearts to people, just to hear them, without talking, when they're talking about their obstacles, their challenges, something like that of their mortalities or their deaths, we can really be a source of light in the midst of their darkness. And we have that responsibility as those who follow, hopefully, in the footsteps of the Prophet.
Inshallah. Sheikh, I want to ask you, because a lot of people actually avoid talking about death, avoid the whole subject.
Yeah, of course.
Why do you think we have this fear of death, other than obviously as the beautiful hadith you mentioned from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, something that we're ignorant of? And I also want to ask you, how do we overcome this fear?
Yeah. I think that the primary reason, personally, I think that the primary reason why we fear death is because of a failure to really understand who the Lord of the worlds is, We oftentimes understand our religion through this belief that God seeks vengeance, like on his creation, or that God is consistently angry, or that God doesn't want anything good for us. I hear it all the time, right? Like in our religion, everything's haram. Like, why is everything haram, right? Why is God doing this to us? Why is so on and so forth? When we take a step back and you really think about the first image that you had individually of God, or if you ask any, pick up anyone, right? Boundless of race, ethnicity, gender, culture, upbringing, I don't care. You ask them, what's the first picture that pops up into your mind when you think of God? I can assure you that the majority of people think of a really angry creator who's up in the skies, ready to throw down some thunderbolts at anyone who disobeys his commands. When in reality, like we know, that's not who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, right? Rather, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful of those who show mercy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he wants our success. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to sound cliche, but he loves his creation, And I think that when we shift our language and we shift our rhetoric toward focusing upon these aspects of God, something like this transition that takes place between this world and the next doesn't necessarily seem so bad anymore. Like I said before, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Arhamar Rahimin, he cared for you and I when we were this small in the womb of our mothers, microscopic. And then he cared. You have children, Hajj Mustafa?
I have two.
He cared for your children when they were born into this world, when they were how insignificant. They were this small, right? Yes, they needed our tender care and they needed our support. I also have two children. And so many things can go wrong, right? In that first month of life, in the first 3 months of life, in the first year of life, right? So many things can go wrong, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cared for them. Now I want you to fast forward. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cared for us in, a decade ago. He cared for us the decade before that. He cared for me and was merciful to me in my bad times as well as in my good times, right? When I go through the ups and downs of my life, You know, in our language, God has always had our back. Why, for some reason, do we think that our family members, the well-wishers in our community, take our body, they dump us into a grave, and then that's it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forgotten about us? That's the perception that we have. That's it, we're alone, right? We're alone. We tell ourselves. We're alone once we get into that grave. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is still with us. وَمَعَكُمْ إِنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. He is with you wherever you are, not limited to this dunya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful of those who show mercy, and I have full confidence and full conviction, and that's the Lord that I believe in, and the Lord of Muhammadin wa Ali Muhammad, that creator of ours, the Lord of the heavens and the earth, the most merciful of those who show mercy, only wants our success, which is why when someone passes away, we call them marhum, right? Someone who's encompassed in God's mercy, you know? I think this is the primary reason, because of our failure to understand who our Lord is, that we fear death. A failure to acknowledge and have deep understanding and ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Shaykh, may Allah prolong your life and give you a blessed and healthy life, inshallah.
Allah.
Do you think that when your time has come, you're ready?
No. I hope so. I think that's what all this is about, right? That's why when you walk in, you know, through these graves, the most important reminder is, at least individually to myself or to the one that is, you know, walking in between those graves or in any graveyard or is reminded of death, is like, am I ready? What's going to happen to me, you know? When you see that body being lowered into the grave, when you attend a funeral, you know, I see myself like being lowered into that grave, you know. When I see a body being shrouded, or when I pray over the dead body, when I'm performing the salat al-mayyit, I think about someone else performing that prayer like over me, you know. And in all honesty, that's frightening, you know. It is frightening, because as much as I say what I truly believe, I'm not frightened because I'm fearful that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't be merciful. It's about me doing my part, right? It's about me fulfilling my individual part. At the end of the day, there's always more to be done, you know? We have sins, we have lapses, we have people who must be upset with us. And it's a bit worrisome, you know, to think that when I leave this dunya, that one person out of all of the billion people on this earth would actually be happy that I'm no longer in the world. You think about that for a moment. As Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen says in the, you know, famous narration, live amongst people khalatun nas mukhalatatan in mittum ma'aha bakau alaykum wa in ishtum hannu ilaykum, that live amongst people in such a way that if you were to die, they weep over you, but when you're alive, they crave your company. What happens if one person says, alhamdulillah, Fayyaz, no longer alive? What a blessing. That's frightening to me. That one person who, by my language, by my actions, by the way I looked at them, by some offensive comment that I may have made even sarcastically, is upset or hurt such that they are thankful that I'm no longer in their life, or that I'm no longer in this dunya. That's pretty scary to me. And so I think that every day should be seen, you know, naturally as this new opportunity to improve where we were yesterday. And I think that's what it's all about, right? Can I be better tomorrow than I was today if I have it tomorrow? Forget tomorrow, I have right now. So can I be better right now than I was 10 minutes ago? How do I improve, right? How do I improve my interactions with others? How do I improve my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How do I improve my relationship with my family, most importantly, right? They're the ones who likely are going to be those who either pray for me and think about me and make dua for me and give charity on my behalf and recite Quran for me, or those who forget about me really, really quickly. So it's about really thinking about the now and being present in the moment, you know? And through that, I think every single day there's more opportunity to, you know, virtually accumulate enough confidence individually to say that when I depart from this dunya, I'm going to be comfortable, and that transition is going to be truly worthy of me, not only receiving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy and bounty, but really receiving as much as I can of that bounty and mercy and that grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when naturally we're going to need it. And I think it's this balance, right? Not to talk too much, Hajj Mustafa, forgive me.
No, it's fine. Like, you mentioned you love speaking about death, so alhamdulillah that way. Well, you mentioned this beautiful hadith by Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. May Allah, again, I hope that because you have served the community, may Allah give you this long, lengthy, healthy life so you can serve the community. How do you think the community all actually remember Sheikh Fayyad?
I don't know.
How would you like them to remember Sheikh Fayyad?
I think about that a lot. Yeah. I think about that a lot. Hopefully they think of me as someone who is accessible, someone they could talk to, someone they could learn from, someone who was merciful, compassionate, caring, sought to make amends between people, make a difference in the world, be some agent for change, for good in this world that desperately needs good. But that's only what I can hope, right? That's only what I can dream of. Now you stump me, because it's hard to think about that, I hope that people are receptive to the things that I said in my talks, in my conversations with them, that they appreciated, my sarcasm or witty remarks and didn't take them offensively. Someone who was hopefully sincere. Really, naturally we all want to be remembered with, all of those good virtues that every single human being naturally seeks and ascends to, being someone who's kind and caring and loving and patient and generous and so on and so forth. I think we all want that.
Are you ready to forgive everyone?
Inshallah, yeah. Hope they forgive me.
What do you think the most difficult part of maybe being in a grave is?
Physically in a grave? It's lonely, man. It's lonely.
It's the loneliness.
Yeah. It's lonely, right? We're so connected to people, to social interactions, and it's a little bit difficult once in a while to think about, the fact that over there's no one, right? There's no one. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like we said, is present. But it is challenging to think about, truly being in that state. And again, to have no one to intercede, right? To no one to speak on your behalf, to have no one to pull you out of those challenging questions, that were going to be asked. But truly, I think that, at the same time, and I think that this is what it all comes down to, there is that little bit of fear, right, that we have. لا يكون مؤمن مؤمنا حتى يكون خائفا راجعا, as the Prophet ﷺ says, that a believer is not a believer until she or he is both fearful and hopeful. So we're fearful. We have that, sense of, worry and stress and anxiety of entering into that grave and departing from this dunya. Really, that, for all intents and purposes, is the only thing that we've ever known, But at the same time, I have that hope too, right? Yeah. I have that hope in God's mercy. I have hope in the Messenger of God, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hopefully, by presence or by my love for him, to shine some light when I'm in a bit of darkness.
And the loneliness. You reminded me of one of my favorite lines. In dua, kumayl ma hakadha dhannu bik.
Ma hakadha dhannu bik.
So
yeah,
it's that hope.
Yeah.
Amir al-Mu'mineen repeats that line twice, I believe, in dua, kumayl ma hakadha dhannu bik.
What else do we have though, right? What else do we have? What else do we have other than to hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Raja.
Yeah. لا يكون مؤمن مؤمنا حتى يكون خائفا راجعا. Yes, we're fearful, but that hope that we have in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what's a bigger driving force than hope, in all honesty, right? We hope in things that seem so far away from us, in the tangible dunya, and for some way, somehow, think about like certain moments in anyone's life. They think, oh man, I'm never gonna get married. Oh, I'm never gonna get a good paying job. I'm never gonna, I'm never going to be able to travel to Karbala. I'm never going to have a child, right? But they have that hope at the end of the day. I'm never going to get past this illness. My family members is definitely going to pass it, but they have that little bit of hope. Right?
You can't live without hope.
You can't live without hope, naturally.
We hope that we'll wake up the next morning. If we didn't have hope, you can't live without hope.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
Humanity needs hope to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And when that hope, right, is so present and deep and entrenched within our hearts, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, right? It's this driving force that makes us grow, that makes us, cultivate these hearts and souls, right? It makes us seek toward being better today than we were yesterday again. Like we keep on running back to that same theme. So I enter into this grave, you enter into it, Hajj Mustafa, may Allah give you a long life as well. Yes, we have that little bit of stress and anxiety, but man, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that hope, some way, somehow, seems to supersede that fear that I have consistently. And I think that's and I really, really think that's a really, really important quality that we need to start cultivating within ourselves, within our families, within our communities, inshallah.
Inshallah. I've got something for you, Sheikhna.
Yeah.
It's a gift to ease the dhulma, the darkness, and the dhiq of one's grave. As I mentioned, Sheikh, I've known you for some time.
Sure.
I know of your service to the Ahlul Bayt.
Thank you very much.
We've done programs with yourself.
Absolutely.
And may Allah continue to bless you. This is the water from the shrine. You can take this with you, so it's not just for this. This is the water from the shrine of Hazrat Abbas for you.
Thank you very much. Allah bless.
And I've got this holy flag from Imam al-Hussein alayhi.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And you truly deserve this because you've served Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in the best of forms, and I'm sure you know this term quite well. You've become a na'i al-Zahra wa musibat al-Zahra wa ibn al-Zahra al-Hussein. You've become the reciter of the masa'ib of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam.
Thank you very much.
There's a certain word that's used here a lot. It's called Khadim al-Hussein.
Right.
You've become one of those khuddam
Inshallah,
of Imam al-Hussein.
Inshallah.
What does that mean to you, Sheikh?
I mean, what better honor, right? What better honor do we have than to be of service to the Prophet and his family, peace and blessings be upon them, Inshallah, if they accept us at the end of the day, I don't think it means anything. I don't think it means anything if it's not sincere, And I think that self-accounting is so important. And again, thank you so much for this token, and thank you for your kind words. But this is only, again, in this, temporal realm. You're telling me this. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees is that which is in our hearts, and inshallah, it's sincere. Our efforts and our love and our mawaddah to Ahlul Bayt, and if it's not, then virtually it
means nothing.
Yeah, it means nothing.
I asked you how again, I'm sorry, taking some time from you. I asked you how you want others to remember Sheikh. How do you want the Ahlul Bayt to see your a'mal? Why did you choose this path, Sheikh? Why did you choose this path, first of all?
Because I love them. Because I love them, and I want to share their words with others, And I think that when we talk about the beauty of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, of course we have like so much love and so much conviction in them, peace and blessings be upon them. And I think that they're the source of light for anyone and for everyone, whether you're a believer in them or not, whether you're a believer in Islam and in this tradition or not. The words of Ahlul Bayt, kalamukum nur, as we say in Ziyarat Jama'ah, that your words are a light. That has this ability to illuminate hearts and souls. I think we're in this world for, such a short period of time. It's so transient. It's so passing. Our job is to make as big of an impact in it as we possibly can during the time that we're in it. Individually, between my deeds and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala personally, but also socially, also communally. This is what we learn from Ahlul Bayt. And I think that one of those ways to truly transform my own heart, but also to help others along the way, is to really just share them with other people. I think that, we hold them as hostages many a time. We hold them only for ourselves and within our own communities. And I think that if, 1, 2, 10, 15 people benefit from something that I said, who may never have been otherwise exposed to Muhammad and Ali and Fatima and Hassan and Hussein and the Imams that come from his progeny, alayhimus salam, then that suffices. That inshallah suffices. And I think that, going back to the first portion of your question, what does it mean to being their servant? I think that that's exactly what it means. It means to, number one, allow for their teachings to be something that's transformational for me individually, that allows for me to continue to grow in my life. And inshallah, I pray that's the case. But then secondly, to also impart and share that with others, such that others can also again feel inspired to make a difference in this world by what it is that they take from Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam.
Thank you, Sheikh. I leave you to contemplate on this grave that we have, and maybe I'll leave you to think about it, inshallah. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much. لا إله إلا الله اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وتب علينا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
شلون بيا بكيف لو لا وفوني لا القبر عقبي الغسيل شالون نزلوا بحفرتي وعوروني وقام دفعاني بالتراب شلون بيا لو مسيت بحفرتي شلون بيا لو مسيت بحفرتي دار غربة بالسحاب من غربتي لا عمل وياي ويرد وحشتي ويبعدوا عني هلي والصحاب شلون من كرلو لي فاني للقبر